Well, hello and welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. This time round we're revisiting the Aston Martin that we covered 2 or 3 weeks ago. And that's this beast, and there's really no other word to describe it. The Aston Martin V8 Vantage Le Mans ? And the reason I say question mark is because Aston Martin started indulging in some confusion, like a lot of car manufacturers did in the 60s and 70s. Mercedes-Benz were terrible for it. They'd come out with a 280 SE and then put a 3.5 litre engine in it and call it not a 350 SE, but a 280 SE 3.5. Then a 280 SE 4.5 for the American market, then a 450 SEL 6.9, do keep up, then a 300 SEL 6.3 and a 300 SEL 3.5 on top of that, and then a 238 because it was made in 1968. Then Ferrari had the 365, which was the cc per cylinder. Then they had the 512, which was 5 litres, 12 cylinders. Still keeping up? Well, okay, here's another example. This car, even the number plate has got V600 on it. It's an Aston Martin V8 Vantage Le Mans. They made 40 of them only. And it was 550 brake horsepower with the twin supercharged engine. And it was also 550 pounds per foot of torque. Thank you very much. And not, as a lot of cami engines are, 500 RPM below the red line. The peak of this car's torque curve is right in the meat of the engine's usage, round about 4,000 RPM. But the confusing thing is, they made 40 of these, as I say, in this beautiful, most if not all in the beautiful Aston Martin Racing Green, which goes back to the 1950s. They all started life as 550 brake horsepower, but 39 of the 40 cars have been uprated to 600 brake horsepower. And that was done with a special £14,000 24 years ago, which is a lot of money now. It was then for an add-on kit, thank you very much, but it's a lot more now. For your £14,000, you could have it uprated to 600 brake horsepower and 600 pounds per foot of torque, which were monstrous figures in the late 90s and early noughties. Tesla wasn't even a twinkle in Elon Musk's eye, or maybe it was actually, but certainly not with those power and torque figures. The owner of this car is a very fastidious gentleman. He shows this car at concours events, and rightly so. It is immaculate. But he bought it from work service, from the Aston Martin factory, essentially, or an arm thereof. And they told him at the time that this was the only car that had not been upgraded to 600 brake horsepower. So this is the only standard Aston Martin V8 Vantage Le Mans. It's the only one of the 40 that still has the original specification. And apparently, according to Aston Martin, this is something quite special for that reason. So I think to say it's the economy model managing to just about scrape by with 550 brake horsepower is probably stretching it a little. Having driven this car, we found what the problem is. I've actually road tested it since to make sure it's okay, and we are going to take it out for a drive, and it is fixed. But having done that, I can't see how you could possibly want an extra 50 brake horsepower in this car. It's super fast as it is. The culprit, the reason for the noise, was the water pump, which is the space at the front of the engine. By the time you've got the charge cooler, cooling system, the radiator, the air conditioning condenser, oil cooler, etc. There's a lot going on at the front end under here. And we found that it was the water pump that was noisy, the bearings in that. Well, we've used our listening with the screwdriver method, and don't try that at home because it can be very dangerous with revolving belts and fans and things. But we've isolated it, Marcus has isolated it to the water pump bearings of all things, which were making that terrible racket. I mean, it's very difficult to trace a noise like this on an engine with so much going on, twin superchargers to start with, all sorts of rotational devices driven off the bottom, the front end of the crankshaft. But we've traced it to this, and now it's off the car. It needs rebuilding, this water pump. If I spin it, you can hear it. However, when it's actually on the car, quite a difference. And when that's under pressure with two supercharger belts, as this pulley has got on it, pulling on it as well, the noise is horrible. And it's all just it's simply two bearings and a seal. That's all the water pump has. So it's going to be rebuilt, and then we'll put it back on the car and hopefully restore that lovely V8 burble without the horrible graunging and grinding as well. We mustn't forget the car's done 10,000 miles, so I'm sure there will be lots of people throwing their arms up and saying, oh, water pump failure after 10,000 miles, that's scandalous. I wouldn't possibly countenance such a thing. Well, yes, that's a fair argument. The counter argument is, this is a hand-built car that hasn't had the luxury of gazillions of pounds of research and development money and miles and sending it to Death Valley and wherever else around the world to test it. This is Aston Martin trying to produce something wonderful on a very comparatively tiny budget. And with that, I believe they succeed. The water pump consequently was conceived, I think, for the standard V8 cars. It does have a very large pulley on it, which both the supercharger dry belts go round. And therein, I think, lies the problem, because the poor bearings in the water pump can't really cope with the level of pressure that's put on them. But be that as it may, even if you have to change them every 10,000 miles, it's still a fabulous car to own and to drive. And I can't see many people putting tens of thousands of miles on these. Yes, there are a mile-quenching, kilometre-crushing Grand Tourer, but really, there are modern cars for a fraction of the price. If you want to jump in and do hundreds of miles down across Germany or whatever, there are cars that are far more easy to do it in than this. It can do it, but it's a piece of art. It's a special object. I love this car, actually. I really do. So Marcus has managed to shoehorn the water pump into a very narrow space for the reasons I've explained earlier. It's all been done. It's back together. It's running beautifully. It's got a super quiet factory exhaust on this, actually, which is very quiet. The noise is certainly all there once you start taking advantage of the power of this car. It really is. This is the end of the videos about this car for the moment, because we've finished the work. It's been in for an oil and filter change. We've done a brake fluid change, found the source of the rather cringe-worthy noise that it came in with. We've fixed that. It's ready to go back to the owner, and he can have a season of fun displaying and driving this car. So without any further ado, let's take it on the road. Well, here we are on the road in part 2, having discovered that the water pump, of all things, was the culprit behind the noise. I mean, they're not the quietest engine with all that going on, superchargers, tensioners, for the dry belts, etc., but yeah, it is, I have to say, a lot less nerve-wracking driving behind the engine, knowing that it's A-OK. It's very interesting, because a number of people who said on the first video correctly that it's a standard issue Ford and Lincoln steering wheel. I mean, this is what manufacturers of hand-built cars have to do. They can't engineer their own steering wheel at vast expense. Lest we forget, they only made 40 of these, so it's a very, very rare car. They did, at least Aston Martin did, trim it in beautiful Connolly hide, the rim, which I don't think really was on any other iteration of this steering wheel, but nevertheless, there it is. Right, well, having warmed it up, having checked everything, having bled the cooling system, let's just see what this 550 brake horsepower can do. Oh yes, that's wonderful. The typical, I mean, the exhaust system on this car is very quiet, actually, but the Aston Martin exhaust bellow, intake bellow is there, the induction roar, but also that supercharger whine as well, indicating that everything is present and correct, and boy, does this car take off, even with a mere 550 brake horsepower. I'm surprised it can pull itself out of bed in the morning, he says tongue-in-cheek. Whoa. What a machine. What an acceleration this has got. Considering the size of it, it is a beast. It's a brute. Yeah, and this is the Jekyll and Hyde sort of character of this car. I am just ambling along at idle speed, and it is happy. It's happy. I'm not saying it loves it, but it is happy. But when you touch the accelerator, it's instant, the power. I'll just demonstrate that now. It is quite the thing. So we're down to about 1,000 RPM. And there she goes. That is almost like an aircraft taking off, the way the power just comes in. It's quite almost intimidating is the word I would use for the power delivery on this car. This may be the 550 brake horsepower economy version, the one left, but boy, it's quick. It's quick. And considering what it is, such a big car, the body control, the ride is firm, particularly on this beautifully pocked and scaled and pimpled and blistered road that we use as our test track at the moment. It is a bit firm, but nevertheless, this could be considered a grand touring car, a Gran Turismo car. It is able to be driven long distances without discomfort or unpleasantness. Yeah, and full marks to Marcus for managing to do this without taking too much of the engine infrastructure off, because it was a job and a half to get that water pump in there. But yeah, just instant throttle response, absolutely instant. It's almost like a graduated, you open the throttle and then the superchargers come in. It's like boom, boom. Very interesting the way the superchargers kick in, and it's off. Altogether, a very interesting car, this. Very interesting. And I think the owner is going to be absolutely thrilled to have this back. And he can carry on taking it to Aston Martin Owner Club events, where it will be very welcome. And we'll get him there and back. Always a bonus. Well, that concludes another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please don't forget to subscribe and like, and we'll be back with something else very soon.